every sport has a line it refuses to cross.
Oh, definitely.
But what happens when you just take a giant eraser to it?
Yeah, that is the big question today.
Because usually when we're looking at the evolution of a major sport, we're really just talking about marginal gains,
Yeah.
like tiny adjustments.
Right, like a league might decide to move a boundary line just a few inches to the left.
Or they tweak a penalty to make the game like 5 minutes faster.
Exactly. Or they might add a shot clock or, change the overtime rules. It's a very slow, iterative process of tinkering.
Tinkering, right. But the source material we've got sitting in front of us today, it is not about tinkering at all.
No, not even close.
It is about a complete demolition.
Yeah, we are looking at a thought experiment that basically takes the foundational architecture of an entire cultural institution and, well, simply knocks down the load-bearing walls.
Just takes a sledgehammer to it.
Pretty much. The goal, according to the author of this text, is to see what the house looks like with a completely open floor plan. And the house in question here is Major League Baseball.
Right. So the text we are diving into is this really fascinating excerpt titled The Remix Setup, Erasing the Line. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore the incredibly radical proposition the author lays out here. They're suggesting we completely, permanently eliminate the traditional American League and National League split.
Which is huge.
No more AL, no more NL. You literally take that giant eraser to the map of the sport, wipe away over a century of administrative history, and replace it with a purely geographical format.
Just East versus West.
Exactly, East versus West.
Which, that is a seismic shift in how we understand the sport. We're not just talking about rearranging the furniture here.
Right.
The text proposes reorganizing the actual teams, streamlining the grueling travel schedules, and this is the element that really carries the most philosophical weight collapsing to completely distinct, century-old histories into one single homogenized structure.
Wow.
Yeah, it is essentially a remapping of the sport's entire DNA.
So for you listening right now, even if you are not a diehard sports fan, even if you have, never sat through a 9-inning game in your entire life, the core of this discussion touches on something I think we all deal with.
Absolutely.
This is fundamentally a conversation about the tension between tradition and modernity.
Yeah, it forces a really uncomfortable question about optimization. When we clean up the messy, illogical parts of any legacy system, whether that's a sport, a workplace, or a civic institution, what is the actual cost?
Right, what are we losing?
Exactly. Do we gain efficiency at the expense of identity? When a system becomes perfectly logical, does it accidentally lose its soul?
Man, that's such a good way to phrase it. And that is the underlying current of this entire text.
It really is.
So the author welcomes us to what they call the film room remix. And they explicitly state, we don't just watch the game, we reimagine it.
Which is a cool concept.
Yeah, they're inviting us into a version of reality that doesn't currently exist, but absolutely could.
Oh, for sure. It's a highly plausible alternative reality.
Yeah, it is probably just a boardroom decision away from actually happening, which is what makes it such a compelling exercise to read through.
Well, the AL and L split has always been the definitive line the sport refused to cross.
Right.
The text argues that this split is the reason the game feels like it's carrying something older than the players wearing the jerseys.
Oh, I love that line.
It's great, right? It's an invisible boundary that has dictated the rhythm, the rivalries, and the very mechanics of the sport for generations.
So removing it entirely means we first really need to understand the practical reality of what this remix looks like on a day-to-day basis.
We have to look at the modern blueprint the author is pitching here.
Right. On a purely logistical level, the proposition is incredibly straightforward. No more leagues, just geography.
Right.
If your team is on the right side of the map, you are in the East. If your team is on the left side of the map, you're in the West. It's that simple.
And the text uses 3 specific words to describe this setup. It calls it clean, modern, familiar.
Familiar. I think that's the key word there.
It really is.
Yeah.
The familiarity aspect is crucial because the text immediately points to the NBA and the NHL as the prime examples of this model.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Think about how those leagues operate. They're built on an Eastern Conference and a Western Conference.
Right, right.
So if you are a basketball fan and a team is located in New York, Boston, or Miami, you just know instinctively that they play in the East.
Yeah, you don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. And if a team is in Los Angeles, Portland, or Phoenix, they play in the West. The playoffs are structured around this geography. The travel is somewhat mitigated by this geography. It is intuitive.
It makes complete spatial sense. Like if I look at a map of the United States, I can accurately guess the conference of almost every team in the NBA without knowing, anything about the league's history.
Right.
I just need to know basic geography.
And the logistical benefits of this are enormous, and the source text leans heavily into this point.
Because travel in professional sports is a huge
Massive.
issue.
It's a massive operational hurdle in a sport that plays 162 games in a single regular season.
Which is just insane to think about.
Right. The physical toll of crisscrossing the country is brutal. Under the proposed East-West model, travel gets immediately streamlined, divisions suddenly feel inherently logical.
So you're not zigzagging quite as much.
Exactly. You are no longer flying a team from the East Coast to the West Coast and back again multiple times a month, simply to satisfy some historical league grouping that dictates who they have to play.
You are minimizing the friction of the physical world.
Perfectly said.
Because the current setup of baseball is honestly geographically chaotic.
Oh, it's a mess.
You have an American League team and a National League team in the exact same city.
Right, like Chicago.
Chicago has the Cubs in the NL and the White Sox in the AL. New York has the Mets and the Yankees. Los Angeles has the Dodgers and the Angels.
They literally share the same weather, the same local economy, the same transit systems.
But administratively, they're in completely different leagues.
Right. They play different schedules and are fighting for completely different pennants.
It's wild. From a pure user experience standpoint, if you were designing the sport from scratch today, you would never, ever build it this way.
No, it defies all modern organizational logic.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to explain this to someone new to the sport.
Okay.
Imagine a massive, sprawling high school.
Okay, I'm tracking.
You walk in on your first day as a freshman. The current ALNL system is like dividing the student body based on whether they use a Mac or a PC.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. So the Mac users are scattered randomly throughout the entire building. The PC users are scattered everywhere too. There is no physical boundary separating them.
Right, they're sitting right next to each other in the cafeteria.
They take the same bus home. But the administration insists they belong to completely different factions. They have different assemblies, different grading curves, different principles.
Wow, yeah.
It is historically significant to the older students, like maybe they have deep, bitter rivalries about the McKessie divide. But geographically, to that incoming freshman, it's absolute chaos.
That incoming freshman looks around and thinks the administration is out of their minds.
Exactly.
They are just trying to find their locker and figure out where they fit in, and instead they are handed a map that looks like abstract art.
It's too much.
The barrier to entry for understanding the basic social structure of the school is just unnecessarily high.
Right. But the proposed east-west shift in the text is like a new school board stepping in and saying, enough. This is too complicated.
Yeah.
We are simply dividing the school by the east wing and the west wing.
That makes so much more sense.
If your homeroom is in the east wing, you are in the east division.
Mm-hmm.
If it is in the west wing, you are in the west division. Period.
It is instantly obvious to anyone who walks through the front doors.
Yes.
And that speaks directly to the clean, modern, familiar argument the source is making, especially regarding newer fans.
Right, because we are in an era where intuitive interfaces are highly valued.
Oh, totally. People want systems to be frictionless.
Yeah.
When a new fan decides they want to get into baseball, if the barrier to entry, like just understanding how the standings work and why certain teams literally never play each other, if that's too steep, they will likely just move on to something else.
They'll just go watch basketball.
Exactly. The East-West format drastically lowers that barrier. It adopts a language of organizational logic that the modern consumer already speaks fluently.
It really checks every box for optimization. You save millions on jet fuel. The players get more sleep and perform better because they aren't constantly fighting time zones.
Yeah.
The casual fan can glance at an app, look at the standings, and instantly understand the hierarchy of the league. It sounds like the most obvious, necessary evolution in the world.
It does. It really does. Until the text introduces the central friction of the piece.
Here we go.
Yeah. The author warns us explicitly that baseball isn't built like other sports.
Cool, so it's not the NBA.
Right. We can acknowledge that the new blueprint makes perfect logistical sense, but to understand the true cost of this remix, we have to move away from the geography of the game and dive into the identity of the game.
Okay, the identity. Because the source argues that the ALNL split was never merely about where the teams were located. It was fundamentally about how the teams played the game.
Exactly. This is where the historical weight really comes in. For decades, the two leagues did not just have different names or different logos. They literally operated under different rules.
Wait, really different rules?
Yes. The text points specifically to a massive clash of styles. One league utilized the designated hitter, and the other league forced the pitchers to step into the batter's box and hit for themselves.
Okay, sure. Let's unpack that. The American League used the DH, the designated hitter.
Right.
That is a player whose singular job is to hit. They don't play defense in the field. They just take the pitcher's spot in the batting order.
Which makes sense because pitchers are out there to throw.
Exactly. The National League, on the other hand, made the pitcher hit. And let's be honest, pitchers are generally terrible hitters.
They're awful at it.
Their job is to throw a baseball at 100 miles an hour, not to hit one.
Yeah.
But forcing them to hit completely altered the mechanics of the sport. It changed how a manager had to think.
It turned a National League game into a highly complex chess match, particularly in the later innings.
A chess match.
Yeah, the text emphasizes that this single rule difference created two styles, two strategies, two identities living under one roof.
Let's walk through that chess match for a second, because the mechanical difference is staggering when you really look at it.
Sure.
Imagine you are a National League manager. It is the bottom of the sixth inning. Your team is down by 1 run.
Okay.
You have runners on second and third base, and there are 2 outs. It is a critical scoring opportunity. But the next person due up to bat is your pitcher.
Oh, man.
And your pitcher is throwing a fantastic game, barely giving up any hits, but right now you need someone who can actually swing the bat to drive in those runs.
So you have to make an agonizing choice.
Exactly.
Do you pull your star pitcher out of the game entirely just so you can send a pinch hitter to the plate to try and score those runs?
Right.
If you do, you lose your best arm for the rest of the game and have to rely on your bullpen. But if you don't, you let a terrible hitter take the at-bat, probably fail to score the runs, but hey, you get to keep your ace on the mound for the 7th inning.
It is a constant, brutal calculation of risk versus reward.
It really is.
Meanwhile, the American League manager never has to make that choice. Their pitcher stays on the mound, and the designated hitter goes up to the plate to try and drive in the runs.
So it's a game optimized for offense, whereas the National League was a game optimized for strategy and substitution.
You had double switches, sacrifice bunts, pinch hitters. It was a completely different rhythm.
And the author's point is that this wasn't just a quirky footnote in the rule book. It formed the cultural identity of the fans and the franchises.
You were either an AL person or an NL person.
Exactly. You were either a fan of the high-octane offensive firepower of the American League, or you were a purist who loved the strategic, grinding chess match of the National League. Those identities ran incredibly deep.
Okay, I hear the historical argument. I totally understand the romanticism of the two different styles, but I have to challenge this premise based on the reality of the sport today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because the text itself includes a massive caveat.
Mm-hmm.
It states, even though the universal DH has already blurred that line,
Right.
baseball recently implemented the universal designated hitter. Both the American League and the National League now play by the exact same rules. The pitcher hitting is gone, the chess match is over.
It is.
So, if the rules are now identical, isn't the AL and L split essentially a ghost? Like we are preserving the shell of a building where the interior has already been completely gutted.
That's a fair point.
Why hold on to the arbitrary factions if the mechanics are exactly the same?
And that is the core vulnerability of the traditionalist argument, and the author wrestles with it directly. If the functional difference is gone, why preserve the structure?
Right.
The text answers this by arguing that the feeling of separation still exists.
That's the feeling.
We're dealing with the immense inertia of history here. The author states that by moving to a pure East-West format, you are not simply reorganizing teams on a spreadsheet. You are collapsing two histories into one.
Collapsing two histories into one, that phrasing feels really heavy.
It does.
It feels almost destructive, honestly.
It is a profound consolidation. The text outlines the pros and cons of merging these histories. On the pro side, like we discussed, it finalizes a unified modern narrative for the sport.
It stops pretending there's a mechanical difference when there isn't one.
Exactly. It sweeps away the archaic, invisible divisions and aligns the structure with the reality of the modern single rulebook.
It embraces the truth of what the game actually is today.
Yes. But the cons are deeply psychological.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the text argues that when you collapse those histories, something subtle disappears. You lose the feeling that the game is carrying that ancient weight.
Huh.
Identity is not exclusively tied to current rules. Identity is also the legacy of those two distinct strategies living under one roof for over a century. The bloodline of the oldest rivalries was forged when the leagues were genuinely different.
Right. It's like, okay, think of it like two ancient noble houses that have been feuding for hundreds of
Oh,
years.
do you like this?
They have different crests, different philosophies, different ways of ruling their lands. And then a modern corporate merger forces them into the same massive holding company.
Right.
The legal paperwork says they are now one unified entity. The HR department issues a single employee handbook for everyone. But the people living in those houses,
They remember?
they remember the history. They remember the wars. They still feel the separation in their bones, even if the corporate structure says they are identical now.
That is a perfect analogy. The persistence of that separation is incredibly real because, well, human beings naturally assign meaning to legacy structures long after the practical utility of those structures has vanished.
Wow, yeah.
The invisible line separating the American League and the National League is the unseen scaffolding that holds up the sport's entire aura.
So we are really looking at a massive structural trade-off here.
We are.
Erasing the line trades historical weight for modern efficiency. It trades the ghosts of the past for a clean, logical map of the present. But where does that trade-off actually materialize? Like, where do we see the cost most clearly in the real world?
Well, the source points directly to the sport's ultimate stage to illustrate this cost. The World Series.
The championship.
Right. The text argues that under a pure East-West format, the fundamental nature of the World Series changes completely. It ceases to be a true collision of worlds.
A collision of worlds. That's a great phrase.
It is vital to understanding the history of the sport. For generations, the World Series was literally the only time these two leagues ever encountered each other on the field.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes, they were completely separate ecosystems. During the regular season, American League teams only played American League teams, and National League teams only played National League teams.
So they never crossed over until the finals.
Never. They didn't share scouting reports the same way. The players didn't know each other's tendencies.
It was a true unknown.
Completely unknown. When the AL champion and the NL champion finally met in October, it genuinely felt like two foreign empires clashing. It had this incredible mythological weight to it. It was the absolute pinnacle of us versus them.
But the text argues that if you erase the leagues and pivot to an East-West format, the World Series becomes just another matchup.
Right. It loses that mythological otherness.
It becomes geographical rather than cultural. It is just the team that survived the right side of the bracket playing the team that survived the left side of the bracket.
Exactly.
You know, the author has a line describing this hypothetical East-West championship that is incredibly striking. They write that the new matchup might be cleaner, maybe, but lighter.
Cleaner, maybe, but lighter. It perfectly captures the consequence of optimization.
It makes me think about the transition in how we consume music.
Oh, how so?
Moving to an East-West baseball format feels exactly like moving from a massive physical collection of vinyl records to a digital streaming account.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Streaming is objectively cleaner. The logistics are perfected. You don't have to carry heavy boxes of records every time you move to a new apartment.
No, you definitely don't.
You never have to worry about a scratch ruining a track. You can search an artist and instantly play any song they have ever recorded without even getting off the couch.
Yeah.
It is incredibly efficient.
The barrier to accessing the music is completely removed.
Completely removed. But vinyl has a different quality. Vinyl feels heavier, and not just in physical weight. It has friction.
Friction.
You have to physically pull the record out of the cardboard sleeve. You have to carefully place the needle on the groove. There's a faint crackle of static.
There's an experience to it.
Yes. There are liner notes you can hold in your hands. There is a history attached to where you bought that specific record and who owned it before you. When you drop the needle on a record, it is a deliberate event.
It demands your participation.
Exactly. Streaming gives you the exact same audio file. The notes of the song are identical, just like the rules of baseball are identical with the universal DH.
Right, right.
But the experience of consuming the music through streaming is undeniably lighter. It has less friction. But in removing the friction, you also remove a layer of soul.
That analogy cuts right to the heart of the legacy fan's dilemma, which the author highlights beautifully.
The legacy fan.
The legacy fans are the ones who feel the loss of that weight. They are the ones who suffer when the game becomes totally optimized. As the text warns, in a perfectly clean system, it becomes easier to forget what made it different in the first place.
If you smooth out every single rough edge to make the system flawless, there is nothing left for the fan to grab onto. The friction is where the memories live.
That is so true. And this brings us to the ultimate warning of the remix. The text states, "Not every remix improves the original, but some force you to hear what was always there."
So by holding up this clean, modern, perfectly sterile East-West blueprint, the author isn't necessarily demanding that baseball adopt it tomorrow.
No, not at all. They are using the thought experiment as a mirror.
Ah, a mirror.
They are forcing the reader to recognize that the illogical, messy, geographically chaotic divide of the American and National Leagues is not a mistake that needs fixing.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It is the structural foundation of the sport's identity.
It is like walking through an old house you've lived in for years.
Okay.
There is a weird, quirky alcove under the stairs that doesn't make any architectural sense.
Yeah.
It is totally inefficient space.
Right, just a dead zone.
But you don't realize how important that strange little alcove is until a contractor suggests drywalling over it to make the hallway perfectly straight.
And suddenly you miss it.
Suddenly you realize that the weird, inefficient nook is the exact thing that makes the house feel like your home.
The text concludes with a very stark reality about these kinds of sweeping changes. It says, this isn't just about changing divisions, it's about changing identity. And once you erase a line like that, you don't get to draw it the same way again.
You cannot reverse a structural demolition.
You really can't.
If you destroy over a century of distinct league history simply to optimize the travel schedules and, make the standings easier to read on a smartphone, you can't just change your mind a decade later.
No, the damage is done.
You can't just draw the lines back on the map and say, actually, let's bring back the old magic. The magic existed because of the unbroken lineage. Once you snap that historical thread, it is gone forever.
Yeah.
You are just holding a piece of string.
The value of the tradition is deeply tied to its continuity. The moment you interrupt it for the sake of efficiency, the continuity is broken and the weight is lost forever.
So we are looking at a permanent, fundamental trade-off.
A huge one.
On one hand, modernizing the structure, erasing the old ALNL line, and moving to an East-West map makes the sport undeniably cleaner.
It does.
It lowers the barrier of entry for new fans, it streamlines the exhausting logistics of a 162-game season, and it aligns the sport with the modern, efficient conventions of leagues like the NBA and NHL. It makes the spreadsheet look absolutely perfect.
But the cost of that perfect spreadsheet is immense. It risks erasing the foundational identity that gives the sport its emotional resonance.
Right.
It takes the mythology of the World Series, the true collision of worlds, and reduces it to just a geographical coincidence. It makes the game significantly lighter.
Once you erase a historical line, you don't get to draw it the same way again.
No, you don't.
The text actually leaves us with a bit of a cliffhanger for the next part of their series. They write, tomorrow, we find out who benefits from that change and who gets left behind.
Which is a great tease.
It really is. But as we wrap up our analysis of this concept today, I think the most valuable takeaway extends far beyond the baseball diamond.
I agree. The author uses this sports thought experiment to force us to acknowledge the hidden value in inefficient systems. So, I would offer this thought for you to mull over.
Go for it.
Look closely at your own life. Look at your workplace, your community, or your family traditions. What is a deeply inefficient, completely illogical tradition that you still hold on to? Something that, if you analyzed it on a spreadsheet, makes zero logistical sense.
Right, something totally impractical.
Exactly. But you protect it because, on a gut level, that if you streamlined it, if you optimized it for pure efficiency, the very soul of the thing would become unrecognizably light.
That is such a profound question. Are you holding onto your heavy, inefficient vinyl, or are you ready to erase the friction and stream?
That is the question at the heart of the remix.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep examining the structures around you, and keep questioning those invisible lines.